In the middle of World War I, the Germans had tried to solve the problem of the British blockade in a number of ways, one of which was the construction of large cargo submarines that were designed to move high-value, low-volume materials back and forth on various journeys, mainly trade missions with the United States. However, a combination of the need for as many submarines as possible, along with the loss of one of the two cargo-carrying submarines, the Bremen, on its maiden voyage, as well as deteriorating relations with the United States, led to the rest of the class being taken over by the Kaiserliche Marine for use in active warfare. Being large and long-range, the boats could be outfitted with a comparably heavy armament, a pair of torpedo tubes with 18 torpedoes in stock, plus a pair of 150mm or 5.9-inch deck guns, and a pair of 88mm guns, which led to their classification as U-Kreuzer. This represented about a 50% increase in torpedo payload and more than a 100% increase in surface firepower when compared to the typical U-boat in the mid-war period, although even larger craft would be under construction by the end of the war. U156 was one of the last of the class to be commissioned. Ordered at the end of 1916, she launched in April 1917 and commissioned at the end of August of the same year. Despite her size and potential, she didn't seem to have all that much luck at first, despite being placed under the command of Captain Lieutenant Konrad Ganser, who had racked up quite the kill count in the Mediterranean waters whilst in charge of U-33. Her maiden patrol started on October 16, 1917, but the voyage lasted at a grand total of 11 days, only managing to reach the waters off of Norway before she had to abort. Trying again in mid-November and heading for the Central Atlantic went a little bit better, inasmuch as they didn't have to give up again almost immediately, but yielded only a handful of ships sunk before, in January 1918, she headed to a meeting with her sequential sister, U157, to collect some valuable cargo for carriage back to Germany. Ultimately, she still was a big submarine with a bit of space left over, having used up a fair bit of her supplies. However, Room 40 had gotten wind of the operation, and HMS E-48 set up a textbook ambush in Naus Bay in the Canary Islands. Torpedoes were fired. One of them slammed into U-156, and then failed to detonate. This seemed to at least partially lift her bad luck, as her return trip yielded 5 more kills of reasonable size. However, returning to Germany in March was followed by several months of refit and turnaround, during which time Ganser was reassigned, and his Naval Academy classmate, Captain Lieutenant Richard Felt, was placed in command, with the U-boat assigned in June to use its long range to engage in a mine-laying and commerce raiding mission off the US East Coast, the same place where a couple of years earlier her sister ship Deutschland had been taking on cargo. By July, she'd arrived on station and opened up quite a long tally of ships by sinking a Norwegian sailing vessel, but her single largest success came somewhat indirectly on the 19th of July when one of the mines that she'd laid sank the armoured cruiser USS San Diego, the single largest warship that the US Navy would lose during its active involvement in World War I. A couple of days later, the sub surfaced off the Massachusetts coast and laid into whatever it could find that happened to be in reach, taking out a number of cargo barges and a tug before American aircraft showed up and a rather comical battle ensued as the aircraft dropped bombs that then refused to explode, and the submarine tried to use her deck guns as impromptu anti-aircraft guns, which would have needed a direct hit for their contact fuses to work. Unsurprisingly, on a moving platform without stabilization, the appropriate sights or any fire control equipment, the aircraft escaped the 88mm gunfire just as much as the sub escaped from the dud bombs. A few shells from the engagement did incidentally manage to land on the US soil, thus technically making the battle the only time where the US mainland was shelled by enemy vessels in World War I. The sub then headed north and spent most of August steadily chewing through various Allied fishing vessels, the odd steamer, and a lone tanker. During this period they would also capture the Triumph, a Canadian trawler, arm it as an auxiliary raider, and use it to help them for a while, which helped rack up the casualties amongst the fishing fleet. With the sub's fuel and supplies dwindling, U-156 finally set course for home. Unaware that German signals had been compromised, she radioed ahead with her route and transit time, so that any German ships in the North Sea wouldn't engage her by accident, and to give High Command a better idea of when she was due back. However, Room 40 was listening in again, and a trap was set. The brand new HMS L8 was dispatched to set up yet another ambush. On the 25th of September 1918, L8 spotted the U156 travelling on the surface and prepared to dive. The L-class submarine was far superior in underwater combat compared to U156, but it would rather decisively lose a surface gun action. It appears that L8 was probably spotted by U156 in return, as the German submarine also dived. This kept them clear of the immediate danger, as underwater sub versus sub engagements were not a thing until World War II, but it now meant that they were travelling deep underwater in an extensive Allied minefield that they'd been specifically ordered to sail through on the surface in order to avoid hitting the mines, and also to make spotting some of the telltale signs of mine activity somewhat easier. The next day, radio calls from Germany to U156 received no answer. Although it will not be definitively known unless or until the wreck is found, it seems most likely that U156 ran into a mine underwater and was lost with all hands.
That's it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you have a comment or suggestion for a ship to review, let us know in the comments below. Don't forget to comment on the pinned post for dry dock questions.